And we're going to dive into General Mark Milley because in recent days, this guy's been in some hot water over revealed communications with his Chinese counterparts. And Glenn, he is coming out today and defending himself. And keep in mind, this comes from a new book that's coming out from Bob Woodward and Bob Costa. No more Woodward and Bernstein. Now it's Woodward and Costa. And so I haven't confirmed any of this stuff. No one has, but this is what they report, that Milley basically subverted the chain of command and conspired with the Chinese to let them know that if Donald Trump launched a nuclear attack or some other attack in his waning days in office, that Milley was in charge and he'd make sure it didn't happen. And that he looked at all of his top generals and said, you understand, procedure runs through me if Donald Trump gives such an order. Milley comes out today and says, I think it's best that I reserve my comments on the record until I do that in front of the lawmakers who have the lawful responsibility to oversee the U.S. military. I will go into any level of detail that Congress wants to in a couple of weeks because he's supposed to be speaking to them. But apparently he's saying that he believes his behavior was perfectly within the duties and responsibilities of his job as chairman of the Joint Chiefs, saying that these calls are routine and were done to reassure both allies and adversaries, in this case, in order to ensure strategic stability. Seems like just another way of saying I did it, but I had a good reason to do it. Your thoughts?
This was, I think, a really underrated dynamic in the Trump years, which is right from the beginning, there were all kinds of reports about the CIA purposely undermining Trump. They would celebrate it in the media. They would say, the CIA has decided that there's certain classified information they don't trust Trump to have because they're afraid he'll pass it to Russia or handle it irresponsibly. There were stories about Trump ordering troops to be removed from Syria, and Pentagon officials and CIA officials deceived him into believing they had, when in fact they just kind of moved them around, believing that it was a bad choice and their decision-making was better. And so there was always this, fine line that the media had to walk between cheering these generals, like John Kelly, who was the chief of staff of President Trump, and General Mattis, and H.R. McMaster, who was his national security advisor, heralding them for saying these are the people who are going to save us from Trump. And then on the other hand, saying, oh, there's no such thing as a deep state in the United States. Only crazy conspiracy theorists believe that. When the whole idea of a deep state, which comes from decades of foreign policy scholarship, is that if you have a democracy on the surface, but in back of it have this kind of permanent military and intelligence apparatus that acts as a backdrop or a safeguard against a president who was elected doing bad things, that's what a deep state is. It's something there that will override the will of the elected leader by exercising their own judgment about what's best for the democracy. This is what happened repeatedly, and this seems to me to be what happened here, which is this was not a case where General Milley called a concerned adversary or other country worried about something to reassure him. He was calling the Chinese to essentially tell them that he would go behind Trump's back if Trump was doing anything that he thought was too threatening to the Chinese, and would tell them about it without permission and would act to stop Trump. That is an extraordinary thing to do because it's to take away civilian control of our government and hand it to the military.
Yep. And now you've got, I think it's 26 Republican representatives, a retired general calling for a military treason probe of General Milley, saying, look, this was blatant disregard of civilian control. He gave aid and comfort to America's principal adversary, the Chinese Communist Party. His pledge to China is nothing less than outright treason, they say, to conspire with a communist, malfeasant, hostile, and genocidal government about our intentions or lack thereof, with utter disregard to the implications of said promise on our national security or our service members. It's nothing short of craven at best and treasonous. I mean, that's the thing that I can't get past, Glenn. If Milley did this, it's telegraphing so much to the Chinese, right? It's basically saying, I got a guy in the Oval Office who's a nutcase who in his waning days in office might launch a nuclear attack on you. Now, maybe Milley's counterpart over in China was grateful for the information, but who the hell knows what the Chinese would have done with that information? Who knows whether they would have had plans to grab some of our guys so that if they were in a hostage situation or wanted to create one to sort of hold over our heads, or if they scrambled some sort of jets, or if they moved some aircraft carrier. I have no idea what the Chinese did, But you can make a good argument that we were less safe after Milley's phone call to his Chinese counterpart than we were beforehand. And I do feel like this guy, he might not only need to lose his job, he might wind up in cuffs.
Look, I mean, beyond all that, like, do you trust Mark Milley more than Donald Trump, which is the debate that they want to have? Because they know a lot of people view Donald Trump as this kind of maniacal figure, especially after he lost the election and was mentally decomposing or whatever they claim. The founders in drafting the Constitution foresaw the possibility that the elected president would become mentally imbalanced or unstable or otherwise incapable to exercise the duties of his office. And there's a provision in the Constitution about how you handle that, the 25th Amendment, which is the cabinet can initiate those proceedings, the Congress can, and you can remove or temporarily suspend a president if they're actually, kind of crazy in the way that Mark Milley was suggesting to the Chinese Trump had become. He didn't do any of that. He bypassed all of those constitutional processes, those democratic safeguards, to basically seize control of the levers of power on his own, even though nobody elected him. And so, I've been trying to think of an analogy to convince people who hate Trump to find this alarming. So, you can imagine, say, in 2011, when Obama and the Obama administration really wanted to get involved in the NATO war in Libya to take Gaddafi out. Obama didn't really want to, but Hillary Clinton did, and Susan Rice did, and Samantha Power did, and convinced him, along with the French and the British, to do it. And there was a big debate at the time. And the Republicans who controlled the House actually voted against authorizing that war, and Obama ignored that and went ahead with bombing Libya anyway. And to this very day, Libya is a huge mess as a result. Imagine if a right-wing general inside the Pentagon had called Gaddafi during that debate and said, hey, I just want you to know that anything Obama's planning with this war that I'm against, that I think is crazy and will unleash a huge crisis in that area and in Europe, I'm going to tell you about in advance. You'll never be taken by surprise by anything that we do. And I also give you my word that I'm going to do everything to stop Obama from executing this war, even though he is my commander in chief, and under the Constitution, I'm duty bound to follow his orders. That would be treason, clearly, calling an enemy of the United States with whom we were at war and vowing to give them inside classified information and to subvert the president in order to protect that country. That's exactly what General Milley did here. So whether it's illegal or not is something that I don't want to rely on Bob Woodward and Bob Costa's book in order to conclude. I'd like to see a process that investigates that and surfaces the evidence. But politically, it seems extremely dangerous. Not just that it happened, but that so many people seem comfortable with it.